So if we're thinking about bone mineral density, that describes the mineral on the outside of the bone, which basically makes the bone tough and strong and resilient. And so that's what we're measuring when we have a DEXA scan, for example. It measures our bone mineral density, and then it defines us in a range for bone health using words like osteopenia, low bone mass, osteoporosis, once it's become more severe. So that tells maybe 70% of the bone strength story, sometimes less. So it's not the only factor that we need to consider when we're thinking about our bone health. It's not just about bone mineral density. And I think when we look at things like pharmacology, so some of the types of drugs that are used to change our bone, they can make a difference to bone mineral density, but whether or not that actually provides greater overall fracture resistance is unknown. It's one aspect of bone strength.
All right. Well, it's a real pleasure and an honor to have Dr. Tracey Clissold on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, Zora. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for waking up super early in the morning in New Zealand for this episode. So I'm very grateful for that. You do so much amazing work as it is. And here's something else. So I appreciate that. And I really want to dive into your story and how you got into the bone world and bone health, because I first met you, or I learned about you from Dr. Stacey Sims, who beats the drums on women are not little men. And yes, she's just been an inspiration. I took some of her courses, absolutely love everything she does. And when I started looking into you and what you're doing, and you're doing this incredible research on bone health, and you're bringing it to the forefront because you created some real practical systems so that we can actually build stronger bones. It's not just in the research, because people go, how do we apply this? And you're showing how to do this. And before we dive into some of that, I'd love to hear your story, because you're an athlete and you're in New Zealand. I'd love to hear your story and why you decided to focus your research on osteoporosis and bone health. If you have your own bone story, I'd love to hear that too.
Awesome. I do actually have my own bone story, and it goes back a few years. So I did used to be a marathon runner. I used to run marathons for New Zealand and compete internationally over a couple of decades. And at one point I was gunning for getting to the Olympic Games to represent New Zealand at the marathon, and got caught up in a bit of a cascade of low energy availability and ended up with a stress fracture. So a stress fracture is, as we know, a red flag of which basically tells us there's some abnormal physiology going on. And I should have known better, but that was a real wake-up call for how important bone health is. And so I had my own little experience with it, and I've been dedicating my life to that sort of exercise physiology, nutrition, helping to educate and empower athletes to not make the same mistake that I did, but also any kind of research in that sort of female health space is of interest to me. So I love Dr. Stacey Sims, and she happens to be a really fantastic friend of mine, and I love what she's doing in the world, sort of raising the profile of and educating women on what they can do to optimize their physiology to age well. So the bone piece is a big part of it, and I guess that's what's inspired me.
Oh, interesting. So it must have been such a disappointment to be so close to the Olympics. And I guess sometimes I always think things happen for a reason, and you've been meaning to make this message, and we're all grateful for that. But God, that must have been just horrific to deal with.
Yes, but I love running, and I've kept running's part of my life still. I'm not competing as a runner anymore, but yeah, I had lots of wonderful experiences as a runner and a competitive athlete.
And actually, this whole crowd, I've been interviewing a lot of people from Australia, New Zealand and Australia. And it seems like that part of the world, people are really focused on bones. A lot of great research is coming out there. And it seems everyone I've been interviewing lately is an athlete.
Really?
Yeah, and they all have their own bone story. And actually, it's when you're doing all the right things, quote unquote, or you're trying to stay healthy and having a low body weight sometimes, or you're overtraining or under eating, this can contribute to osteoporosis and the low bone density and all the just getting injured in general too. So it's kind of ironic how we try to be healthy and yet there's a trade-off for it.
Absolutely, and I agree, and I think you're right. A lot of the people I've come across in the sort of women's health research area are all post-athletes, and many of them have had their own negative experiences, and we know that the understanding and knowledge of female physiology has changed. There wasn't a lot of knowledge about missed menstrual cycles back when I was an athlete. There wasn't a lot of information telling you what the cascade of negative effects are that come from that, and even that duty of care for what that might mean for later life. So that's why I'm loving being part of this fantastic momentum for changing that narrative and providing a lot more information at the sort of the coalface for our athletes, but also for their coaches, the sports scientists, everybody that's working with those athletes. But it's bigger than athletes as well. And that's, I think, when I was coming to that decision of where to do my research, I realised that, bone health is a problem for athletes, but it's actually an issue for all women. I mean, all humans, but we know that women are disproportionately represented in the osteoporosis statistics. So it just seemed like a no-brainer to actually come up with something that could be a public health intervention that could actually be meaningful for more than just athletes. For athletes, yes, but for everybody, no matter how they define themselves.
Well, our audience is a woman going through this menopause transition, and this is where we see accelerated bone loss. And I've interviewed so many other people on the exact details and the mechanisms, so we won't go dive deep into it, but maybe you'll just briefly cover why are women losing more bone in this transition, and we have disproportionately more osteoporosis than men.
I think the first point is that we've only got a finite amount of time to build the skeleton that sees us out through the rest of our lives. So most women and men don't understand that peak bone mass is achieved pretty close to the end of puberty. So we've achieved just about our bone bank that's going to see us through the rest of our lives by 30 at the latest. So peak bone mass for young women can be 18, 19 years of age, and for men maybe a couple of years later. And then we have a little bit more grace to add a little bit more bone, and then we start losing it slowly from the age of 30. So half to 1% of our total bone mineral density is starting to lose up to the age of menopause for women. And when that estrogen is withdrawn through menopause, women have this debilitating time where we can lose up to 20% of our entire bone mineral density in those 5 to 7 years around menopause. And our loss of bone from there on in is 1 to 2% a year. So it's like falling off a cliff for women at menopause for their bones. And so if you haven't gone into menopause with a good, strong skeleton, then your sort of losses are going to be far more severe, and that osteoporotic situation is going to come on early, and those first fractures are going to be achieved earlier. So there's a really fantastic sort of theory that if you can just build 10% more bone in that peak bone mass, then you can delay osteoporosis by 13 years.
13 years?
Yeah, which is amazing.
Wow.
So if we can educate our sort of under 30s to have a bit more, whether they're not that interested in their bones at that time, and I suppose that's why I pegged my research in that premenopausal space, sort of 30 to 50, but there's so many times that we can think about our bone and make a difference to our bone health lifelong. For sure.
Yeah. I was shocked when I first heard that it was for females, like late teens, that they stopped building bone. And because we're always throwing around this word, at least not including me, I'm like, it's the 30s, it's you build bone mass until the 30s. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, my kids still have some time. They're in their 20s, but now I'm like, no.
Deliver the message now. Yeah, the more you can. And it's not too late when you get to 30 and that's what my research showed as well, is that there are ways to still improve bone mineral density when the textbooks tell you you should be losing it, because a lot of the trends that we see are based on the way that people live their lives as they age. So we start to become more low impact, and we don't look after our muscles, and that whole muscle piece is a big part of the bone piece. So your kids, for sure, it's not too late, and it's just being active and giving those right messages, and we can't go wrong actually delivering those messages because we've never had them before at that age. So there is potential for us to do things better, for sure.
It's funny because we use this analogy with a bone bank, right?
Yes.
And let's just build up, and we have more room for error. I think that's what it is. But it doesn't mean you're doomed, right? We can still build bone,
Absolutely.
We can build muscle.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be that way, but it's kind of the trajectory that we're seeing if you follow the sedentary lifestyle that we all tend to do and not do the things to build the bone, then you may have 13 years more. But it's silly when we think, well, wait, we shouldn't just be riding through life like that. It's good to know that we can keep,
and most people want to
have that slope. Doesn't have to be that steep. Let's talk a little bit about because there's some other words that may be confusing to people, because there's bone density and there's bone mass, and there's bone quality, bone strength, bone length.
Yes.
Let's break down what these actually mean and if it matters to understand each of them.
Sure. So if we're thinking about bone mineral density, that describes the mineral on the outside of the bone, which basically makes the bone tough and strong and resilient. And so that's what we're measuring when we have a DEXA scan, for example. It measures our bone mineral density, and then it defines us in a range for bone health using words like osteopenia, low bone mass, osteoporosis, once it's become more severe. So that tells maybe 70% of the bone strength story, sometimes less. So it's not the only factor that we need to consider when we're thinking about our bone health. It's not just about bone mineral density. And I think when we look at things like pharmacology, so some of the types of drugs that are used to change our bone, they can make a difference to bone mineral density, but whether or not that actually provides greater overall fracture resistance is unknown. It's one aspect of bone strength. So when we actually create adaptation to the bone to make the bone stronger, we need to actually focus on things like remodeling the shape of the bone, so the bone geometry and its microarchitecture. So the inside of the bone, where the trabecular bone is, that's like a honeycomb. And when it's healthy bone, it's strong and it's really has a beautiful pattern that gives that strength and flexibility to bone. But when we age and our bones deteriorate, we lose some of that beautiful honeycomb effect, and it starts to break and become bigger holes, and that spongy bone becomes less healthy. So that's another part of it. So and that's something that was really important to me in my research, because I was using exercise as an intervention, and we know that exercise creates adaptations to the body, and some of those adaptations are to do with the structure of aspects of our body. And exercise is a beautiful thing because it can actually change the shape of our bone, not just the mineral on the outside, which is that bone mineral density. So that geometry, things like if you think about our hip joint, so one of the most debilitating fracture sites is the neck of the femur. So where the femur bone, our big leg bone, turns like on a 45-degree angle into the hip, and then there's the ball of the femur which goes into the hip joint. So that piece, that neck, when that fractures, that's arguably the most debilitating of all fractures. In my research, that grew in its girth. So it actually grew, and the cortical bone, so the thickness of the bone on the outside, increased as well. So those are all things, all aspects of bone strength that make our bones more robust. So you're right, there's a lot more to it than just bone mineral density, which is the only thing that's described when we have a DEXA scan.
Yeah, so actually in my mind, we see images of the geometry of the bone on the inside,
yes,
and we're assuming that's bone density, where in fact the density is just the outside. It almost should be, the scan should be the bone, trabecular bone density.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And there are software that are now starting to be utilised with DEXA that create a trabecular bone score. So it's able to have a greater understanding of more of what the bone strength is about. But we don't have normative data yet to be able to compare that to what is normal. And there is a lot of research being done in that space. But yeah, that will be something going forward that becomes more important when we're describing the holistic health of our bone. Yeah.
I want to dive into, the screening, because I think this is really interesting. I haven't heard of this before.
Yes.
But before I do, I would like to know your opinion for those who have hip replacements, because then you don't have that neck and the ball anymore. Yes. And is somebody say, woo, I'll never have a hip fracture, or maybe they will, but maybe further down the bone. What does somebody need to know about that?
Yes, you're never going to have a fracture where the prosthetic is, but that's when we measure a bone mineral density using the DEXA scan, we only really measure 2 or 3 places, and one of them is that hip, which can be replaced. The other is the lumbar spine, and then there's the radius in the arm. They are surrogates, I suppose, of what's happening in the rest of the skeleton. So they're representing what the bone health is in other places. Just because you had a hip replacement doesn't mean that the bones in your lower limb are going to have an osteoporotic fracture at some point. So we're just measuring specific sites because we have normative data. We can compare everybody if we measure everybody for the same place, but we've got a lot of bone that's not being measured by those tests, if that makes sense. So you're not bulletproof when you've got prosthetics, because you've still got lots of other bone around that potentially can be negatively affected by a fall, for example. Yeah.
I don't know if you know this or not, but I've had 2 hip replacements
Okay.
at
No, I didn't know
54.
that.
So
Yeah.
that's a personal interest of mine.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering then, when I do jumps, or
Yes.
the impacts and the exercises we'll jump into later, literally, no,
Yes.
no pun intended, is that still building bone on the other parts of the bone? Because
Yes.
the research usually is looking at the neck.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. Yes. So yes, you're not going to make any difference to the hip, but it's the whole body that's receiving those mechanical forces through your feet all the way up through those bones and then translating into the vertebral column as well. So the hip, and you're still going to transfer those forces with prosthetic hips as well. And a lot of people have artificial knees, for example. So the knee's not going to benefit from that impact, but all the other bones are. So yes, we still have to think about, our whole skeleton, not just the sites that are being measured.
Okay. Well, at least I'm doing something for something.
You absolutely are. Yeah.
I want to jump into that we were talking about the scans, because I never heard of this add-on. That I'd love to see more about that. And most women who do get a scan, they get screened with a DEXA, and
Yes.
it's DEXA for those who don't know what that is. They see a number and they panic.
Yes.
And there are limitations to that. And I guess that's probably why they're looking at the trabecular bone. But I would love
Yes.
to hear from your opinion, your thoughts on DEXA, the limitations, and
Yes.
should we really be relying on that one number to make a decision?
Yeah, and I think that's a tough one. I can only talk to my area of expertise, which is researching in this space. And I will also just like to say that I have another piece of software on my DEXA, which most DEXA machines have, but they don't always provide that data to individuals having a DEXA, and that's hip structural analysis. So I am actually able to measure at the hip the shape of the bone and the way that might change over time. So there isn't normative data. So the World Health Organization doesn't have a database where I can compare that to what's normal, but I can compare that to that person over time to be able to show that area I was talking about, that neck of the femur, that it's grown in size and that the cortical bone has increased in thickness. So I can measure that on my DEXA machine, and most DEXA machines can measure that, but it's usually not reported because there's not the ability to compare it to normative data. So yes, the bone mineral density is the only piece that is used to diagnose osteoporosis at the moment and osteopenia. So, whereabouts on that continuum are you sitting? And it's not telling the whole story, and I think that can be quite scary for people, especially people that get given a word like osteopenia and they think it's a disease. So it's like, I've got osteopenia, people coming into my bone clinic panicking, and osteopenia in most cases is age-related bone loss. It's normal. So osteopenia can be pretty much normal for most people. It's just saying that you have lower normal bone mass due to aging. And osteoporosis can put you into this absolute panic because now you've got greater than negative 2.5 on your T-score, but that doesn't tell the whole story of your bone health. It doesn't tell the geometry. You might be a thin person that has thin bones, and so you're therefore more likely to be sitting in that osteoporosis range, but it doesn't mean that you are going to have an osteoporotic fracture. So yeah.
That's the thing, is we put so much weight into this, and really for me personally, I don't care about a number. I want to know, am I going to have a fracture? Like,
yes.
that's what I care about.
Yeah.
And I feel, and as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 70% of the people who have fractures, I don't know if they're hip fractures or falls and fractures, do not have osteoporosis.
That's right. It's a paradox, isn't it? And so that makes it, and I think the World Health Organization is currently in a situation where they're revising some of this information to say, is this the best way to actually diagnose osteoporosis? Because it's being used as a threshold for advising people to take medication. And I think that's a really important thing for us to consider, is that if it's not perfect, but yet we're using it as a sort of reference point for giving people medications that they may or may not need. So again, it's a disclaimer. I'm not an expert in that space, and certainly in that pharmacology space, I'm not. But there's more that you can do than medication. Medication may be beneficial for some people, but it's not that we want people to just take medication and still just live the lives the way they're living them. So being able to create some education around what people can do, like from a green prescription perspective with nutrition and physical activity, and they may take some medications as well, then that can create a cumulative benefit for bone. So just taking drugs is not going to just be the only thing. There's way more we can do.
Yeah, it does have its limitations. And I do have women in our community who are on medication and they're saying I walk and I take calcium in my medicine and I don't see a change in my bone. And so there's some more things we need to do, which we're going to break down. But before we do, I would like to hear your thoughts. If you know anything, again, this is not maybe not your expertise, but you're in this world. I love that DEXA is having now an add-on, but what about the REMS scan, REMS?
Yes.
Apparently it sees the geometry and the structure now.
Yeah. And I think it's quite exciting, the technology that's coming through with the REMS. So it's ultrasound technology, which means that there's no radiation load, which is great. DEXA is very low radiation dose. So each one of those clinical scans is the equivalent of you sitting at your computer for 2 hours, that background radiation, compared to if you have a chest x-ray, that's 6 weeks of sitting at your computer, that load of radiation, and a CAT scan's like 2 years. DEXA is very low radiation dose, but it's still radiation. And so therefore there's limitations for us using this technology with children, using it with pregnant women, for example. So the REMS is ultrasound, so no, just sound waves. And so just like what you might have experienced with ultrasound technology with physios before, sort of looking at diagnosing other kind of soft tissue injuries like tendons and ligaments. But I think the technology is great because, it does give some indication of that geometry as well as that bone mineral density. There's not an established database for REMS yet. Knowing what your result is for REMS is still, the way you interpret that is still in its early stages. But I think that, there's definitely a lot of potential for that becoming widely used. It's not really used in New Zealand yet, so I haven't had a personal experience with it, but I know in Australia REMS is being used a lot and across the world. So I think that there's potential for this technology for sure.
I think so too. To be continued. We'll see. Time will tell. But it's just not accessible for many people. That's the problem.
Right. But it's going to be way less expensive than DEXA as well. So I've just upgraded my DEXA machine. I'm sitting on it at the moment, and it's an exorbitant amount of money that you spend on DEXA, and that's why you generally just find these in hospitals and pathology labs. It's very difficult to get access to having a DEXA without a referral, and in our country you have to be 65 to get a DEXA referred, so with our health system to pay for that. So it becomes something that people aren't even talked to about because of the fact that referral process happens so late in life. But with the REMS, for example, it will be very easy to become technically proficient with it. People can have it in their own sort of settings, whether they might be personal trainers or strength and conditioning coaches or sports scientists could have that technology. It won't be anywhere near as expensive as DEXA, and you'll be able to give some really powerful data to people to help guide them on making changes going forward, which I think is key. If people can understand that there is some risk, however we've determined it, that can be a powerful motivator for people now making some changes and doing things differently.
Yeah, I agree. It is, and it's so small. It's relatively speaking to a DEXA, it's just portable. And I like the idea that you could test an intervention quite often, whereas a DEXA, maybe you don't, I know it's low radiation, but you don't maybe want to do it all the time, several times a year, with an ultrasound. Why not?
Yes, absolutely. Right? I agree. And there's more research coming out using REMS as the means of measuring, like you say, the change in bone to an intervention. And if I think about research with DEXA, your research studies have to be at least a year's long to be able to capture a full bone remodeling cycle and to show that change. DEXA is still gold standard, even though REMS is here, but how motivated researchers have to be to roll out studies that are at least a year. That's a long study. That's a lot of infrastructure around research for clinical trials to be rolled out for that length and to then be valid and useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and research is expensive.
It is.
If we can shorten the time, it may be better. But so let's talk about really what actually builds bone and what doesn't, because I meet so many women who say they're walking for their bones, they're doing yoga, and they remind me they're taking calcium too. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that walking is great for a lot of other things, but it doesn't apply enough force for us to actually stimulate bone growth. But what kinds of exercises are not moving the needle to prevent or reverse osteoporosis and lower that fall risk?
Right. So there was research done before I did my research, way back. Even Wolff's Law, 100 years old, basically tells us about the forces that the skeleton needs to switch on, to stimulate it, to grow new bone. There's been a lot of research since that's established what we call osteogenic thresholds. So osteo meaning bone, the threshold to switch bone on. And we can describe that force, or those forces that bone needs to switch on, by the amount of force. We often describe that in terms of body weights. So how many body weights of force need to go through the bone to switch it on and start that physiological process of bone anabolism, growing bone. And so that has been determined in premenopausal women to be 3 body weights of force. Okay, in postmenopausal women, 4 body weights of force. And that sounds a little bit difficult in translation, but it actually isn't, because 4 body weights of force are very easy and very safe to apply to the skeleton. And so in my research in premenopausal women, my women were easily and safely achieving thresholds 5, 6, 7 body weights of force, just doing simple jump landings that were really safe. Okay, so 3 and 4 body weights is easy to achieve safely, but a lot of the exercise that we do falls well under that threshold. As you mentioned, a lot of women are walking, and walking is fabulous. I like to describe it as it's lovely to walk, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't walk. I'm absolutely not saying that, but it doesn't achieve the thresholds for switching bone on. So it's good for our heart health and our metabolic health, but it might be creating 1.5 body weights of force. That's it. So that's well under the threshold. There's no bone stimulation there. Okay, you might be getting some footfalls that are achieving that 3 body weights with some heavy foots or sort of foot landings walking down a hill or something like that. So some of that stomping type action might get you there, but in most cases walking falls well under that threshold. Even running falls under that threshold. And you think, wow, running, that's a lot of force. But if you think about the way that we run, we're bending all of our joints to absorb the forces, to take the forces in our muscles, not in our bones. And that's good, because we don't want to blow our joints to pieces by landing too stiffly and having greater than 3 body weights coming through our bones. So running's probably providing about 2.5 body weights of force. We run, we bend everything, we absorb the forces, we attenuate those forces so that our soft tissue is absorbing it. So that's still not enough to optimize our skeleton.
And we're probably wearing a lot of cushiony shoes.
We're wearing a lot of cushiony shoes, which people are doing that because they're thinking about the protection of their joints. And for running, I kind of understand that, although there's a lot of research that shows those minimalist shoes, they can actually be more, our body can be more in tune with the forces that we need and can actually be safer for us, because sometimes we put all that padding under our feet and we start to take force that's more than what our body can tolerate, because we just don't notice it and we feel confident because we think the forces are being absorbed. So so the magnitude of force is one important part, and that's why the first part of my research, first couple of years actually, was with force plates. So doing lots of landings on force plates to work out how can I simulate the forces that are required to switch bone on, but that women can do in their own homes with no additional equipment, and that they can do it safely, and I can be sure that they're achieving those forces without me watching them. So creating some movements that are impossible not to achieve those forces, if that makes sense. So that's the magnitude part of it. But then there's the rate of force, so how fast the force is applied. So the bone is sensitive to that as well. So it needs 43 body weights per second, which sounds a bit flash, and how do we do that? But really just a plyometric type movement. So just utilizing our fast twitch muscle fibers, which is golden for us as we age, because we lose those first. So we know about sarcopenia, losing our muscle as we age, but we lose those fast twitch fibers first, and those are the ones that are so important for the muscle pull on bone, and also for the shear forces we need through our bone, and also for our reactivity, so for us to be able to put a foot down to avoid a fall. Because when I talk to the trauma nurses and the falls and fracture nurses, they talk about the people that fall, they never even started to avert that fall. They started falling and they just were like a slow tree falling over. There was no ability to stop that because this fast twitch muscle fibers have basically deteriorated away. So there's a lot at play here, but it's about providing the forces, enough force, but also providing it really nice and quickly. So not a slow landing. Yeah,
not a slow landing, because that's the question I have. I'm thinking what these older adults are lacking is agility to catch themselves, to not fall. And I have to really, to me, sometimes I think we're missing some pieces when we talk about exercise or things to do to reduce fracture risk or to reduce osteoporosis. And when you think about an older adult, 90% of the falls and fractures are fractures are due to falls.
Yes.
So then, in my opinion, I'm like, well, then the game is no fall. Don't fall.
The game is no
So then
fall.
we should be working on balance or mobility.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's so important. So we can't think of bone health on its own. We have to think of bones and muscles together. Absolutely. If I was thinking about what would I want to promote to all women, well, that program starts to get a little bit bigger because we're now focusing on muscle, we're also focusing on bone, we're focusing on balance. And yes, we need to do all those pieces. I wanted, first of all, to strip it down to just the bone piece. So my program I had my women doing in the research was only 2 to 3 minutes, which was absolutely achievable. People can do that while their kettle's boiling, while there's an ad break on TV, while they're at the park with their kids or their grandkids. Just there's places at work that we can do this that's so easy. You don't have to do anything except take your shoes off, do this 2 to 3 minute jump landing program, and then get on with your day. But the muscle piece, that's another piece. And of course, I want people to do that as well. And that's not going to be done in 2 to 3 minutes. So we start to layer it on. But when people can actually successfully do the 2 to 3 minute program, then they go, wow, I can do that. So now I can do another piece, the muscle piece, and I can do the balance piece. And we've actually built some functional strength and balance into the second iteration of our app. So the year 2 program has the jump landings, but also balance and strength in the 30-second breaks. So we've started to add more in. But to do that, the program's now around 8 minutes. So we're starting to now ask women for 8 minutes, you know what I mean? And I know for the people that are already absolutely committed to exercise being part of their lives, that's nothing. But for, when we look at the stats and we say that in most countries, less than half of the population can get 30 minutes of physical activity done of any kind in a day, and that's incidental movement as well. So 8 minutes is a commitment for people that don't exercise, and they have to be the people that we're focusing on. So yes, we want the really motivated people to add the right kind of exercise in because they might not be getting it 2 to 3 minutes, but we need more, but we need to do it in a clever way to get people to overcome their own barriers to do that exercise rather than feeling stressed about having to go to the gym or to do their workout because they can't find time or they don't actually really want to do it. Or
access.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many barriers. So
many barriers. Let's wrap up the piece, the things that do not or don't have enough force to build bone. So we talked about walking, running, probably not. Swimming, I think, is kind of obvious. Cycling. What else?
Yeah. So yoga, all those.
Roping?
What's that? Sorry?
Jumping.
So jump roping is a fantastic exercise for cardio and for our muscles, but it doesn't get into the bones the way that we need to because for a start, we're landing on our forefoot. So we're not able to translate those forces all the way up through our bones. So we're still absorbing those in our calf muscles and our other muscles that we're using to do that jumping. So jump rope's fantastic, but it's not the recipe for switching bone on. Okay, so when we talk about jumping, people go, okay, well, I'm doing jumping at the gym. I might be box jumping, for example. But what the bone needs is the landing to be stiff. And when we do our jumping in the gym, we shouldn't be landing like that. So that's the jumping we do in the gym is for our muscles. So we might be jumping up onto a box, for example. We're probably landing like a feather if we're doing things properly. And all of that force is being absorbed by our muscles because that's what we're actually doing. We're doing this for our muscles so that we can be powerful for jumping. And then when we land off the box, we usually step down softly, or we shouldn't be jumping stiffly and landing off a big box. That's too much force for our bones and our joints. So even people that think they're jumping may not be doing what they need for their bones because they're not taking those forces through the bones. They're still taking it through the muscles. So there's so many great types of exercise, Pilates, yoga, all that stuff is fantastic, but it's not improving your bone. Yeah.
I get a lot of people asking me about rebounders.
Rebounders.
There's another word for that. There's another. In America, we do something else. I don't know. There's another word for that I was using when I was growing up. But just in case people don't know what a rebounder is.
Yeah, like a little trampoline, like a little mini trampoline. Yeah.
Yes.
Again, fantastic exercise because you're bouncing and it's great for circulation and lymphatics and all that sort of stuff. And it's fun, so it feels good. So that's great. But those forces that you're creating are totally being absorbed by the elasticity of the trampoline. So you're not getting any forces translating through your bones with trampolining. It's all about the absorption of the force in that elastic material. So it's great exercise again, but it's not stimulating your bone. And I suppose that's the key thing that we're talking about, is that not all exercise is osteogenic.
I spoke to somebody from your team. I can't remember his name, but he was one of the
Professor John Cronin would have been.
Yes. And I can't remember if I understood him correctly, but he said that if women going through menopause and peri and postmenopause need about 4 times their body weight in terms of impact and force, he said people who have osteoporosis need more.
Yes.
Did I understand that?
The thing is that it becomes a risk to benefit situation. So when you have osteoporosis, that 3 body weights is still what we want if you're under menopause and 4. So I'm not sure if that was interpreted that correctly, but I know that there is some research out there and some really cool meta-analyses that have been using bigger forces with people with osteoporosis and getting amazing results. So we sort of think, wow, someone's got osteoporosis, we shouldn't be getting them to do these stiff jump landings, but this is not our research, this is other research that has shown in osteoporotic people, their bone mineral density was increasing with doing these landings, these impact forces that were greater than 4 body weights. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we should start there with over 4 body weights, but we can still, if we're safe in our landing, so our bones are wanting that force to be able to improve their strength. So often what we do is we take the force away because the person's got osteoporosis, and that's just this massive downward spiral. So most people that I meet that have osteoporosis that come into this clinic, they want to improve their bone health. They're looking at their next 30, 40, whatever years of still being functional and having great quality of life. And if they do nothing, that is not going to happen. They have to get in the way of that.
Yeah, I've seen it myself because when I had osteoarthritis of the hips, I was told no impact, no heavy lifting. So I abided, took a DEXA, lo and behold, osteopenia. It was shocking, and I was very disappointed, and I understand that fear very much because I felt, oh my gosh, if I'm only 50, well, at the time I had 53 or 52 with osteopenia now, then what am I going to do when I'm 70? So that fear was real. And since I've got the replacements, I'm now back in the green normal zone. I've reversed that.
But, that is amazing. Well done.
It's great. We can do these things. But I want to touch on the fine line because I've seen videos of you showing how to do the stiff landing. And so it kind of goes against everything we've all learned. Oh, we're supposed to absorb and protect our joints. And so imagine we can do that. Who should be doing it and who shouldn't? Because if I were to do it with arthritis, I probably would have shock waves going through me because it would be so painful. Who should be doing this and who shouldn't? And how do we adapt if you do have joint issues?
Yeah, and that's such a good question because there's never one size fits all for all. So there's often a need for us to adapt and to be listening to our own bodies and to be progressing based on not having pain, not feeling pain. And I think that's the most important thing. If there's pain there, then that's not right for you to be tolerating those forces. So we have a 4-week, what we call the preconditioning program that we get people to do straight off the bat before they even start doing the jumping. And that's just to get people familiarizing themselves with some sub-maximal jumping, just actually doing some nice soft landings. Because when I ask people who come into my clinic when the last time was that they jumped, some of them have absolutely no idea. They're going back 20, 30 years. They can't remember the last time they jumped. So that's the first piece of it, is actually getting confidence and familiarity with just doing normal jumping, just jumping and landing softly and taking those forces nice and conservatively through your joints. And then when you actually start the jump landing program, some people will jump half a centimetre off the ground. It's not about how high you jump, it's about that stiff landing. So it's about feeling your way with it to start with. So you've practiced the jumps, and then you start doing taking those forces, but doing it progressively as you feel that you can take those forces. So some people are absolutely fine just to start doing the very stiff jump landings, which is, like you say, counterintuitive, where we're told to bend everything, and now I'm saying try to keep everything stiff. So try to land flat-footed. Your knees have to be, you might have a minimal bend in them, and your hips a minimal bend in your ankles. So you're doing almost like a stiff pogo. You're landing so that you feel the forces coming through your skeleton. And if you've got things like knee injuries or hip injuries, you need to be more conservative in your starting. starting with a softer surface to land on as well. So you might be doing this on a rubberized mat or something like that, just to help you to tolerate those forces. And then as you can, you start to land on less forgiving surfaces, but never something too stiff like concrete or anything like that. Landing just on your carpeted floor or on your grass outside is perfect, but it's listening to your body and listening to any signals that tell you that this isn't right for you or too much force for you right now. But any force you take through those bones that's more than you were taking before is going to be beneficial. So you don't have to do a lot of these loading cycles. In fact, it's not good to do too many. So we want you to do no more than 50 of these loading cycles at a maximum. So you'll build up to that. So you might start doing just 10 of the jumps, which are double jumps. So each one is a jump. So 10 of those is plenty to start with. So it's not a lot. We're not saying every time you land, you're landing with stiff joints. You are doing this just when you are focusing on your bone-targeted exercise, so that you're doing it specifically for your bones. The rest of the time, everything's soft landings. Everything's for your muscles for the rest of the day. It's just a very small window of time where you actually provide this. And so it's not actually that difficult to do, and it's not that, if you do more than what I'm sort of recommending on my app and with what I did in my clinical trials, then that's going to go the other way. The bone stops listening after those 50 loading cycles. It's saturated, and you don't need to do that again until the next day. So 24 hours later, go again. That's not a lot.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because many people think, oh, then the more the better.
Exactly, yes. And my head would go there as well. So if some is good, more is better. So people that are, how would we say, type A people. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So you've got to keep it in that little box. So no, this is all I have to do. This is it. Okay. And then if you've got the motivation outside of that, that's when you need to do other things. So that's when, for women, we should be working on our muscles. That is the absolute, it's so key, and it benefits our bone too, because a different kind of stimulus for the bone from the muscle, where the muscle tendon pulls on the bone, and when it pulls nice and strongly on the bone, that's another stimulus for growing bone mineral density and making the structure of the bone stronger. There are other ways we can do it, but these impact forces, just keep it contained to that 2 to 3 minutes a day.
So actually, I was listening today, Dr. Stacey Sims talking about the difference between muscle mass,
yes,
muscle strength, muscle power.
Yes.
And I think if I understood correctly, she was saying it's not just about mass. Mass doesn't actually pull the bone to create the stimulus. We need to have some
force,
power, strength.
And that's that powerpenia I was talking about, is that when and traditionally women have gone to the gym and the trainers have given them the tiny dumbbells and said, go away and go for gold, 20 reps or whatever, and it becomes a cardio exercise. There's no muscle pull on bone from that. And so everything has to be quality as we age for our muscle to actually make a difference, because we've lost a lot of our anabolic functioning when we go through menopause especially, and even in that perimenopause time when our estrogen, which is our anabolic hormone, is dwindling. We need to provide some kind of intensity to actually create change in our muscle, and that has to come from lifting heavier weights with the intent to move it quickly, and we don't need to lift many reps. So our workout in the gym doesn't have to be very long. It's about the quality, and our muscles will change as older women. We will grow and become stronger, and there will be a little bit of mass change, but that's not what we're looking for. And most women will never get much mass change because we just don't have the right hormones for it. But it's that intent to do that exercise quickly and strongly that creates the actual translation to our skeleton and to our power, which is the important functioning of muscle that we need as we age.
You reminded me of the classes, the Jane Fonda classes I used to do with the baby weights, and we wanted to tone. We just wanted to tone.
Did you see Stacey and Jane Fonda on stage about a month ago? Stacey's actually a good friend of mine. She lives around the corner from me. She's only just back from a big trip over in the States, and she did this fantastic presentation with Jane Fonda. And I don't know, Jane Fonda must be she's got to be at least 85, maybe a little bit older. And Stacey was there, and Jane was on the ground doing her sort of buttock walk that she was famous for. But I love that they did that session, because Jane was saying, she was endorsing what Stacey was saying about what women need to do, which was absolutely 360 from what Jane, but they didn't know any better back then. And the fabulous thing is that Jane Fonda's saying exactly what Stacey's saying now, because we know now what women need, and it's not the light weights, it's the heavy weights, and it's the movements that simulate and transfer to how we move in life. That's what we need so that we can take that strength through life and move beautifully through life.
And is it true that the bone actually needs to bend a little bit
does.
if you lift a heavy weight to get that stimulus? As well, right?
That's right. And people think of the bone, and it's not actually, we're not really going to see it bending, but it's creating these shear forces on the surface of the bone. That's all the stimulus for change. So creating that, we're not going to create that with our 1 kg dumbbells. So the compressive forces of lifting are another stimulus. And so for our upper body, that focus is, because my jump landing program is helping the lower body, and it's getting up into the lumbar spine. But for the upper body, it's a lot harder to create those forces that I was talking about, those ground reaction forces, those shock forces. Yeah. And so the compressive forces of lifting weights can provide what we need in our upper body. So our lifting and our pushing and our pulling using our weights is a fantastic muscle and bone exercise.
I've seen Dr. Jocelyn Whitstein do a little reel about how she would imagine doing a plank on a step in your home.
Yes.
And then going down with the force with having a stiff arm.
Yes.
Could perhaps help with the bone increasing in that area.
Yeah.
And that's something you can do at home easily. I don't know if that was in your app. So we want to get to your app because people are going, oh, what's this app you're mentioning? It's called OSTEO-GAINS. And I dived into that as well. And it's really cool. But do you have some of those exercises in the app?
For the upper body, we haven't put them in yet. We have quantified some. So we've published some work. So if you do go onto our OSTEO-GAINS app, there's a research tab. You can read all of the research that we have published. And there are 2 articles in there that use the press-up drop, which is really similar to what Jocelyn was talking about. So what we did is we got our women in a press-up position, but a modified press-up position on their knees, and then just pushing up lightly, and then just coming down with force on straight arms onto the ground, which is very similar to what Jocelyn was doing, more of a stomp in that position. Yeah. And we love that exercise. We haven't run clinical trials to see how that has changed the bone. We speculate that it will, but we're just nervous about the wrist. That's the only thing. Taking the forces, we want those forces through our upper limb and into our cervical spine, but that risk can be a real limiting factor if we're getting people to start taking forces through the wrist. It's just, we're just not 100% sure of how safe that might be. Another thing that you can do that's safer, that I get my women to do in the clinic, is just standing just like a metre away from the wall and just falling against the wall with stiff arms, pushing up and landing again. So doing like a plyometric landing action against the wall, and that provides really good forces. But again, you've just got to be really careful that your wrists can take those forces, and that's got to be the number one thing I think to think about. And so a lot of the research that is not my research but is certainly fabulous research around that upper body bone mineral density is that weightlifting, that those compressive forces, having pushing weights through your arms, creating those compressive forces through the upper limb. So at the moment, that would be what I recommend, is the upper body lifting, but adding some of those wall falls, if you can tolerate it and you're safe and you feel like you don't be too far away from the wall to start with, just take some of that force and see how it feels. I quite like it, but you've got to just really think about holding all your joints nice and strong when you do that exercise.
Yeah, listen to your body too.
Yeah, listen to your body.
And talk to your doctor if you have any serious issues.
Absolutely.
We don't know what you got. But I want to talk a little bit about the app because this is actually why I wanted to talk to you in the first place, because when I heard from Stacey that there was this app, and I looked into this and I said, this is really going to solve some problems for people. Yeah. And as I was doing some of the exercises, because you have this preliminary stage, I can't remember I think they were barefoot, the models who were doing that, right?
Yes.
So if somebody were in the gym doing this, should they be wearing barefoot shoes? Is better than cushiony shoes?
Absolutely, yes. When you're in because a lot of the gyms don't let you be in barefoot, but sometimes there's places in the gym where you can be barefooted. It's easy enough to slip your shoes off just to do and I think it's a good way to, in your head, to know that now I'm doing my bone exercises, you know what I mean? So you might have been doing lots of jumping in the gym with your shoes on, and now I'm going to do my bone exercises, so I'm going to slip my shoes off, and I'm just going to do this 2 to 3 minutes of impact for my skeleton. And what the research tells us is that it's we've got no shoes absorbing the forces, but it's also safer barefooted to do these impact exercises for our skeleton, because our proprioceptive sort of organs in our joint capsules, they will tell us how much force we can tolerate safely. And when we wear shoes, the shoes override that sensation, so we don't get the same signaling to our brain about what we can take, because it might be that with our shoes on, we think, okay, we're going to jump, and we jump sort of 20 centimetres high and we land stiffly, which you can do once you've built up to that, once you've tolerated that over time. But it might be that your first jump height for your bone exercises is 1 centimetre. You're literally just leaving the ground and landing stiffly, and then you're not getting any signalling of this is too much or I can't tolerate this. It feels safe. And then as you get more familiar with that, you start to jump a little bit higher and land a little bit stiffer. But for the start, it's not going to be as effective. It's just going to be baby steps to getting you safely to being able to provide the right kind of forces to your skeleton. So yeah, shoes off perfectly.
All my example reels. I'm thinking the reels I shared is, oh, they weren't stiff landings. And I had shoes on. I got to go redo them.
Well, it's a good starting point. And some people will say, can I do it in shoes? I wear orthotics, or I've got issues with the mechanics of my feet, so it doesn't feel good to land on a flat foot. And in that instance, I'd say try a softer landing surface, or yes, wear your shoes with your orthotics to not exacerbate any other kind of injuries. And that's better than nothing. We're about to actually roll out some research doing the same jumps that we use in our OSTEO-GAINS with shoes on. So we're going to, and what we've seen already, which is not maybe what I thought I'd see, is that our participants in the pilot study created greater forces in barefoot than they did with shoes, so on the force plates. So that was interesting. So I actually thought that they would create greater forces with shoes because they might feel like they can jump higher, but they actually were in tune with their bodies and landing stiffer and with greater force barefooted. So watch the space when we roll the actual study out. Yeah.
Oh, exciting. I can't wait to see that. So if somebody's listening now and they're thinking, okay, well, I can do 3 minutes or 8 minutes, or I follow your app for 12 months or 6 months. This is very minimal commitment in doing some of these jumps and some of the other exercises that are in the app. How long should somebody wait to retest to see if they've increased bone mineral density, if that's even like, I know I keep going back to a number. I can't help it myself. Shouldn't look at that too much, but like, how will they know if they're building better bones?
And that's the thing. Osteopenia and osteoporosis, they are asymptomatic. You can't feel your bones losing their strength. You can feel your joints losing their integrity, so that inflammation creates pain. But a bone that's become frail in terms of going into the high end of osteoporosis, you can't feel that at all. There's no feeling in that bone. So to know that you're making a difference, to actually quantitatively know, you do have to do a scan before and after. And that's not going to happen for most people. Most people are going to probably not have access to that, and they're going to do it knowing that their bone health will be improving, because that is what we showed in our clinical trials. But if you do want your own data, yes, get a DEXA scan and then have another DEXA scan, and I would recommend that a year later. So at the start of our OSTEO-GAINS app, before you start, get a scan and then have another scan at the end of that year. And that's exactly what I did in my clinical trials. And my women who were premenopausal, so they all should have been losing 0.5 to 1% of their bone mineral density, they gained 2 to 4% at those clinical sites. And if you're thinking they should be losing 0.5 to 1, that's like a 3 to 5% gain, which is amazing. And that was just bone mineral density. So then the other things I talked about in terms of the geometry of bone, the neck of the femur, it grew in size. And the cortical bone, which is the outside layer of bone, it grew in thickness. And the section modulus, which is indice for the bending strength or the tensile strength of the bone, all of those things improved 5% for my women. So they not only grew in bone mineral density, but the geometry of the bone physically changed in response to that 2 to 3 minutes of jump landings on 5 days of the week, which is crazy. It's a small commitment for now having these women coming into menopause with stronger, more robust bones.
Incredible.
So it's too easy to do. Yeah.
This is, why no one has an excuse, honestly, that go into this. In your clinical trials, did you have 100% success rate? Or people
Absolutely. Every person improved. So yes, most of the time in research, what we do is we present mean data. So the average person gained this amount, but the range was 2 to 4%. So everybody gained. And the interesting thing was I was postmenopausal when I did those clinical trials. So I actually went into menopause early after having been an athlete, which often happens. So I probably hadn't had a menstrual cycle for at least 5 to 7 years. And I was collecting my own data. I couldn't include it in my data set because I wasn't premenopausal, but I had exactly the same gains as the premenopausal woman did in my study. And that was in addition to all the exercise I was doing, all the running, all the other things I was doing. But I also now increased my bone mineral density, which is nuts.
Incredible.
And so easy.
So we had 100% success with this clinical trial, but you said the range was between 2 and 4%. That's what you were trying to hit, of increasing the bone
That's
mineral
what
density?
I observed. That's what they gained. So between 2 and 4% were the gains when they should have been losing half to 1%.
So that was a 1-year trial?
Yep, that was a 1-year trial. Yeah.
That's so amazing.
I know.
And you're not teaching food or nutrition or
And I didn't intervene in any of that. So, none of my women were on hormone replacement or any kind of pharmaceuticals. I didn't provide any additional, and if I'd done it, maybe I would have got even better results if I'd actually increased their calcium, their vitamin D, their protein, which we know are all important things in the bone health equation. So all I did was provide that 2 to 3 minute intervention. So there's even potential for greater change in bone if we tick all the boxes.
Incredible.
All the green prescription boxes, which are easy.
This is very similar to Dr. Belinda Beck's research, because she also didn't want any other confounding factors, and it was just exercise. And then I spoke to Dr. Sandra Uliano. Do you know her?
No, I don't.
She studies nutrition. She's also an athlete doing marathons.
Yep. Awesome.
And she studies bone and nutrition. And so there was an interesting research that she did over 2 years looking at older adults in communities, and they found that there's 3 foods that they changed or they added in that actually increase the bone mineral density, and something like 46 something was 46%. I don't know if it was like improved bone strength or quality, and reduced falls by 11%, which was quite huge for these older adults who are around their 80s. Yeah. And it was cheese, yogurt, and fortified milk.
Wow. It's just so that's calcium and vitamin D and protein. Yeah. That's perfect.
It was incredible. So you say all these research studies isolating things. But imagine when you put this all together.
I know. And that's the thing. And those 3 things are important, but then there's also people that are plant-based, so therefore it's making sure that they've got fortified with the products that they're having in exchange for cheese and milk, fortified with the same amount of calcium that you should expect to find in milk. So that's like 120 milligrams per 100 mils, so you should be getting a good sort of 300 milligrams for a 250 glass of milk, whether it's almond milk or rice milk or soya milk. But the food manufacturers don't always do their due diligence to fortify those plant alternatives. So you do have to read the label to make sure that calcium's been put in there, because it's not naturally present. So that's something that I definitely advise people to do if they're not having dairy, that they should check the label to make sure that calcium's in there. Yeah.
Let's go briefly before we wrap up. Oh my God, I can't believe how much time we've already. This is just too exciting. Awesome. Since we're on the nutrition piece, I think some of the big levers are the protein and the calcium and certain macronutrients that we need. Yep. But what about, I want to dive into the supplementation, because say if you're vegan, then you probably need to supplement it sometimes. It's always food first, for sure. And I recommend women to use any of those apps. Just log yourself just for 3-4 days, so you never have to do it again.
That's right.
But you just do it, and then you'll see how much you're getting from food, and then if you need to supplement, because maybe you don't. And Dr. Jocelyn Whitstein, she wrote a great book where she dives
I've got a copy.
Into
she gave me one.
That's right. You probably, when you saw her, it's a great book. So she dives into the nutrition there, which I think is really good. And then the supplement thing, there's one supplement that some people take, and it's a it's called strontium citrate.
Yes.
And what does the evidence say about this kind of supplement, and what should we know about it?
Yeah, so I'm actually not an expert in that space. I know that algae cow, for example, they add that in for adults that already are presenting in that osteoporotic range, and they do have some clinical trials to support the use of that. But I think that it's not for everyone, so there are some contraindications, and you don't necessarily need to take it unless you're in those sort of latter stages of osteoporosis. So yeah, there is some research there for sure, but I think that maybe we need more research in that space. I love that a lot of the supplements that you can take are actually natural products. So whether it's an algae that comes from the ocean, I think you can't go wrong when you're taking a supplement that's coming from algae in the ocean. That's kind of beautiful. And
probably have other benefits too.
Yeah, that's right. And then you've got, so knowing that calcium is an inorganic mineral, a lot of the supplements we take for calcium are like green-lipped mussel shells. You're basically eating shell or bone. Dolomite, which is an old school calcium supplement, it's bone. You're basically eating bone. So I think those sort of supplements have got some real value because, yes, like you said, they provide what we need in terms of the nutrients for bone, but they also contain all sorts of other lovely things that could be beneficial to us, and more likely that our body's going to successfully take them up and utilise them for building our bone. Yeah.
So actually, that's why I like to eat canned salmon sometimes, because there's
and
bones
the
in there.
Yes, absolutely. And bone broth is something that is getting there's a lot of fantastic protein powders and creatine powders that have bone broth and bone extract, which is awesome. Yeah.
Cool. Is there anything that we should really be skeptical about? Because there's so much noise in the space. Once some people found a fear and latched onto it, they try to sell all kinds of programs or devices or supplements and things. What should women really be questioning or cautious about when it comes to bone health products and promises?
Yeah, I think it's probably the same thing for any promises. Like social media is making it so difficult to navigate what's the noise and the anecdotal actor or actress or sports person that's promoting something that's not backed by clinical evidence. So looking for the research is, I think, very key. The people that we're following, for example, Dr. Stacey Sims, everything that she presents is evidence-based. So she's collecting evidence-based data from wherever it's coming from, and then she's disseminating it out to her followers, which is so great because reading scientific literature is really difficult to do. As a scientist, it's still not easy. It's not easy to digest the important information in academic literature. But that's what we have to trust, is that the findings that are and the information that's being presented is backed up by science. It's got some evidence. There's evidence in human beings that shows that this works, and we have that evidence available to us. So we've got access to read that if we wanted to go to it and read it, it's there, and it's been published in incredible peer-reviewed journals.
Let's talk about OSTEO-GAINS. We'll wrap this up with that because I think this is a brilliant app. People can download it now. There's a free section as well. And you give very clear videos. And like you said, the research part. And actually, I saw the video of you having the force plates or somebody,
yes.
there. You were testing the force. So you can actually visualize how some of this research happens. It's a really cool app. So tell us a bit more how it works and what people should expect.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Zora. The app basically is what I got my women in my clinical trials to do. So because the results were so amazing, incredible, not what you would expect, it just was a way to disseminate something tangible, like a way that everybody could have access to what my women in my clinical trials did. Yeah, this is OSTEO-GAINS is available at the Apple and Google stores. I think it's $24.99 US for a year's access. So we have year one, which is exactly what I did with my clinical trials. And now we have year two, which is that where you get to at the end of that 1 year, because you can never stop actually providing the stimulus. So that's the same with any kind of exercise. Like the way the body adapts is that it adapts as long as you're providing the stimulus for change. But when you stop doing it, your body has potential to start regressing again. So we can never stop. Ever. So we've got 2 years worth of helping you to understand what kind of stimulus you provide. You can go away and do it in the context of your own life. And that's what our third iteration will be. So we're working on technology that is a wearable technology where you could have a little isoinertial sensor on your ankle, just wear it around, and it will communicate with the app to tell you, oh, you've achieved already 30 of the osteogenic forces that you need out of the total of 50. You only have to do 10 of the double jumps,
and motivation and gamification.
That's right. That's right. So people love all of that stuff. This app's real easy because it is just following videos. We've got all the instruction there and telling you how to do it. And we've got progress, so we collate what you've done and hopefully motivate you to stay with us for the 52 weeks. And yeah, it's a 2 to 3 minute commitment, so it's absolutely so easy to do. You don't have to purchase any equipment. It does have a small charge to it, but we haven't made a cent out of this app, and in fact we're still trying to achieve some kind of funding to help us to stay in this game, because it's expensive, this app world, and we're researchers, we're academics that just have a passion for sharing what we know works and that we know doesn't have any barriers. It's just anybody can do it in their own home.
It's better you make this app than somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing and throws in some exercises that maybe we should be doing. It's more trustworthy coming from you. But so we please everyone who's listening, it's nothing to get for the year. Start with the free. You've got the progress chart, the accountability, possibly in the future if we're all using it. Do you have the wearables? It's so cool. If you have some streaks there, like don't stop, you're on a streak.
And if you do, that's fine. Just come back to it. And that's the thing that I think people get really caught up in, is that they fall off their routine, whatever it is, with being good with their exercise or their nutrition, and then it's just like, oh well, I'll toss it in. But it's never too late to come back. Just come on back again and just get back into it. It's absolutely, it's perfect. Every time that you're actually doing it is the perfect time. I think that's
maybe if you lost your streak, you could do double time and then make it up.
No, not with the jump landing. So just keep with the program. But like you said, Zora, the program's free to download, and you can do our preconditioning program, that 4-week preparing you for the jump landings. That's for free. So you just do that. We've got a stretching program in there as well. So the preconditioning program is actually 20 minutes. So that's doing some basic strengthening and practicing some submaximal jumps, and the stretching program as well, and then get into it after that.
Is there anybody who should not be doing this or should be getting checked with their doctor before they actually get started?
Yep, that's a good point. So the only people that we really say have a contraindication for this are people that have spinal fractures or have spinal issues. So if you already have issues with your spine, then you may not be able to be safe doing these jump landings. So we ask people to read our disclaimer and get medical clearance before they actually start with these, because they are impact landings. So somebody that's already got a fragile spine, we don't recommend that you do this. But those people should then be looking to lifting weights to be able to get that benefit to muscle and that muscle pull on bone. So just a different way of providing stimulus. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I think we've covered it all, because I've got links to osteo-gains.com, the website, and the Instagram and the app, where to download this app, as well as your email in case anybody has any more questions.
Awesome.
And so before I let you go, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before I leave you?
Last thoughts. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, Zora. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to talk to your followers and share this information about our OSTEO-GAINS app. And I suppose I just want people to just take charge of their own lives and know that it should be a goal for us to age as fabulously as we can. Yeah, just some of these little small things that we can do that can make a really big difference. And today's a great day to start.
Yes, I love it. I always say menopause is the biggest opportunity we have to protect our future self. So
it absolutely
your 80-year-old self is being formed right now. So let's get started, because she's going to thank you later on.
Absolutely. Well, keep up the good work, Zora.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone who's listened to the end of the podcast. And I want to hear your stories, your thoughts. Please share this episode with anyone you think it would add value to their lives. And we appreciate you. We wouldn't be here without you. So thank you. Have a good day, good night, good morning, wherever you're at. And thank you, Dr. Tracey Clissold, for your time as well. And I hope to see you again.
Thanks, Zora.